Welcome back. Today's episode hits close to home, well, because it is home. We're diving into the guilt that comes from family dynamics, the expectations we carry, the roles we didn't ask for, and the emotional weight that can come from simply loving people who are also a little bit complicated. This is the kind of guilt that doesn't always have a name, but it shows up in thoughts like, why do I feel responsible for everyone else? Am I a bad person because I set boundaries? Why do I feel guilty for succeeding when my family is still struggling? Why does taking care of myself feel like a betrayal? Does this sound familiar? Well, you're not alone. Family roles are often unspoken, but they're deeply internalized. You might be the fixer, the caretaker, the peacekeeper, the provider, or the one who made it out. And with that role comes guilt. Guilt for not doing enough, guilt for doing too much and feeling resentful, guilt for leaving, succeeding, cutting ties, or just simply wanting space. These roles that we are put in often start out early. Maybe you were the older sibling who had to grow up fast, or the child who saw more than they should have. Or maybe you're the one in the family who's always been the strong one, and you're absolutely exhausted. We're taught that family means everything, right? That blood is thicker than water, that you're supposed to drop everything for the people who raised you or grew up alongside you. But what if that family also caused harm? What if being in that environment stunts your growth? This is where guilt enters the room like an uninvited guest, and it lingers. So let's get a little more specific. What can family dynamic look like? Well, one way is feeling bad for being financially stable when your siblings or parents struggle. Another could be cutting off that toxic family member and then feeling the weight of being the one who abandoned them. You could be the golden child or the successful one, and because of that, you're constantly downplaying your achievements. Maybe you're not able to care for your aging parents, but feeling crushed under the expectation that that is your job. Maybe you're simply feeling guilty for missing milestones or not calling enough or just not being as present as you think you should be. And lastly, divorcing your partner and breaking up the family. I hear that a lot with family dynamic guilt, and I think that family dynamics carry a unique kind of guilt. It's quiet, very layered, and often hard to explain to the people that we love most because it's really not about blaming anyone. It's actually about love. For me, a big piece of this guilt has come from being the oldest sibling. If you've ever heard the song Surface Pressure from Encanto, that's pretty much my anthem. There's this unspoken expectation to lead, to succeed, to go first, and somehow do it all right the first time. So that way, the ones that come after you have a good, steady path to follow. And when you stumble, which of course you do, it hits a little bit differently. That guilt isn't just for yourself. It's for your parents, your siblings, and even this ideal version of yourself that you thought you were supposed to become. There were moments when I thought, what if I'm not a good example to them? What if they make the same mistakes that I did? Or even worse, what if I've let everyone down? There's also a pretty big age gap between me and my siblings, and that's brought on its own mix of emotions. When I moved away, I started missing birthdays, school events, the heartbreaks, and even the hard days. And I'm not gonna lie, it stings. Not being there for them, to show up, to comfort them, or to even celebrate the small wins. I also found myself slipping into a mom role at times, offering advice, trying to fix things, when what they really needed was their sister. And when I miss that mark, the guilt rushes in. Another family dynamic guilt that comes into play for me is that I live very far from my family, about 1,200 miles. So that adds another layer of guilt that I feel like we don't think about until we're in the moment. My children don't get to grow up the way I did, surrounded by their relatives in a small, tight-knit community where everyone knows your name. And God forbid, when something happens to my parents, whether that's something joyful or something hard, I'm not there to be beside them. That part hurts more than I anticipated. I think a lot of us carry this guilt in silence. And what does guilt do in silence? You got it. It grows. Not because our families expect us to sit in the silence, but because we love them so deeply and we want to show up. Part of us needs to learn to live with this guilt, but it's also recognizing when it's rooted in love and giving ourselves grace for the things we can't always control. Up next, we're going to hear from Miss Regina about her dealings with family dynamic guilt and how she got through it, and just hear a little bit about her story. So without further ado, here we go. Hi, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm Allie.
Hi, I'm Regina Hiremath. I'm the founder of Alimonia Life, divorce blog with a private community, motivational speaker. I'm also an executive board member for a domestic violence organization and recently certified life coach and travel agent.
Wow, busy woman.
Yes. Oh, and I'm a hair and makeup professional as well.
I love it.
Mother of 3.
Oh my goodness. All right. Would you just like to tell us a little bit about your family dynamic as you were growing up and kind of what that looked like for you as a child?
Okay. So my parents were young and incapable of raising me. As far back as I can remember, I spent a lot of time with my maternal grandmother. She was my first memory of love. And when just before I started kindergarten, she and I relocated out of state. We were having a new home built. Such an exciting time of life to watch the home wrap up. And then I started kindergarten. Unfortunately, when I was in first grade, she passed away from cancer. And the family came together and decided that it was time for my mom to step up to take care of me. I relocated back out of state to live with my mom for second grade. My mom was very unstable financially, emotionally, mentally, and we were moving around a lot, staying with people. And during that time, I was suffered trauma and abuse in nearly every way. I ended up injured and in the hospital. The case went to court. My mother lost custody of me, and my grandmother's sister stepped up to raise me. So I had to relocate out of state again and to live with her, only to discover that my great aunt was an alcoholic, terribly abusive, physically, verbally, and emotionally. I survived 10 years of that. And at the age of 17, I grabbed a trash bag and I ran away with a few items. I landed with my best friend for a few days while I figured out my next move. I ended up going to a completely different state with where my mom was living, and came into early adulthood pretty scarred.
Yeah, I can only imagine. I am so sorry that you had to go through all that. That is a lot. So during all that time, obviously a lot of turmoil, a lot of chaos. Did you ever feel like maybe as a child you were put in a different role that maybe you didn't ask for? Like maybe, I know sometimes children who go through that feel like they're the parent at times or anything like that.
I was definitely a parentified child. from the age of 6 or 7, living with my mom, I always felt like I was the one in charge. I remember one particular night when she left the apartment to go buy cigarettes, and she'd been gone for some time. And um, this the corner store was just a couple blocks up the street, and I remember going to look for her. I'm 7 years old. I went down the street at night, went into the store, didn't see her, came back into the apartment and locked the door.
Wow. So you mentioned that, of course, when you started your adulthood, you had lots of trauma. How did that affect you going forward?
I lacked self-esteem, confidence, was seeking approval and love, not exactly even sure what that even looked like. My last true memories of love was kindergarten and first grade. So I was very exposed, coming into adulthood, looking for things outside of myself and not finding it, finding more trauma.
And were you ever able to speak with anybody about this, whether it be professionally or if you had other family members or friends to kind of let them know what was going on?
No, no, no one really knew, the things that I was going through. It was happening quietly, other than when in second grade the case went to court. Of course, it came out, but um, a lot of it was hidden.
And what kind of emotions do you think really stood out for you? Doesn't have to be when you were a child, but maybe just throughout your life.
Lots of fear, not being, I think one of the biggest things was that I couldn't spot a red flag.
Right. Because that's kind of all you grew up around.
Everything was a red flag. So all of the red flags felt like comfortable banners.
Right. So you got out into adulthood. Now you're doing all of these things, doing it all, being the strong woman that you are. How did you get to this spot?
How did I get to this spot? Well, in my mid-20s, I met someone and fell in love. Um, 2 to 3 years later, we got married. And prior to the marriage, there were red flags, but of course, because those felt comfortable to me, I was unable to see the amount of trouble that I was in. I spent 23 years in the marriage that was shadowed by narcissistic abuse, financial, emotional, and verbal abuse. I sought therapy halfway through the marriage, all the way up until just recently when I ended my therapy. But it was quite a struggle because I was made to feel as if all of our problems rested at my feet. If I could change myself, if I could be better, if I could do things smarter, then the marriage would work and be successful. And 23 years of that is a really long time, but 6 years prior to me finally leaving, I'd filed and attempted to leave, and he begged me to stay. I took a few days to think about it and said, if you see a psychologist, then I will stay. So for 4 years, we saw a psychologist, one step forward, two steps backward. It just never really improved in the right direction. After 4 years, I decided that I'd had enough. So I spent the fifth year in therapy. to get myself strong enough to do what I knew was going to be the best decision of my life. It wasn't easy. I worked really hard during that year. And January of 20, I filed for divorce, and I never looked back.
Good for you. That takes a lot of bravery and strength and really just pushing through that fear. And a lot of people, I think, 23 years is a very long time, like you said. And I think a lot of people who have never been through that, or, they don't understand, right? It's easy to say, well, why don't you just go? But it's not that easy at all. And 23 years of that shows you how hard it actually is. So hopefully people who are, when they hear this, they'll maybe that'll get them to understand that it's really not as easy as just snapping your fingers and getting over it.
Right. Because it wasn't like I had a safe place to land. If it were just me, it would be easy for me to walk away. But by the time I filed for divorce the first time around, it was me and 3 other people.
Right.
And I had no one who could take us in. I had to be the answer. I had to find the solutions. I had to do the work.
Right. And how did your kids take it?
It was difficult for them to understand. And I'm sure that they felt like, like I was ripping everything apart at the time. But they're older now.
Right. Right. They got through it and they're okay. And that's the most important part.
Yes.
So out of all the stuff you went through, what do you feel like the hardest decision you made was for you?
To walk out that door. Because my whole life I have been told that I was not smart enough, or that I was not worthy.
And now here you are, proving that you are.
Yes. Yes.
I feel like, we probably all know someone who's also gone through something like this, maybe not to that extreme, maybe a lot lesser, maybe a lot worse. Do you have people that you connect with now as an adult, or, you're doing a lot of things. You said you're a domestic violence advocate. So have you connected with people of all walks of life?
I have, through my divorce blog, Alimony Life, and that's probably where I've connected the most with people, because as you said, I sit on the executive board for Confronting Domestic Violence. I'm also head of community relations there. I don't deal with victims. On that side, they would all be here in the house with me. So I really couldn't, that would be a difficult challenge for me, to see people in the situation, not want to bring them home and feed them and love on them. But through my divorce blog, I have encountered many people who have been in abusive situations. And a few years back, a friend of mine, she sent a close friend of hers to me. And I have the divorce blog. I have the private community. It's about educating them and sharing the things that me and the other writers have been through, and whatever helpful information I can find for them. I'm not someone who deals with, victims, but because this was a close friend and her friend, I stepped in on a personal level to support her as she walked away from her abusive marriage. And the interesting thing about it was is that her story was so identical to mine that I could tell her what he was going to do before he did it. And it triggered me. It really did. And I had to take some time to work through my own triggers, but thankful that I was able to do that and to support her. Um, a year or two later, I was coming out of work, had on my mask during COVID, and a woman was approaching me in her mask, and she called my name, and I looked at her because I didn't recognize her, and she pulled down her mask, and it was that young woman. And I remember just a sense of accomplishment and joy that I felt. And I asked her how she was doing, and she said that the divorce was final and that she and her son were doing well, and she was continuing on with her PhD program. So made me very, very happy.
Right. As it should. That's awesome. So when you finally, you said you were going through, therapy together for all those years. And then finally you were like, you know what? I'm doing this for me and your kids. But did you ever feel any sort of guilt that you were about to, quote unquote, break up the family, take your kids somewhere else, even though it was for the better? But I still, I think that sometimes when we do things for the better, we still have those negative emotions that come over us, the fear, the guilt, the anger.
Absolutely. I had struggled with fear and guilt for years, halfway through the marriage, all the way through the end, because I had such a traumatic childhood and my parents never married. And so the fact that I had married and this beautiful, big, beautiful home and these nice cars and the ability to travel and do all of these amazing things as a business owner and supporting him in his endeavors, I felt an extreme amount of guilt because from the outside, it was like a fairy tale. It appeared like a fairy tale, and all of my friends and family thought that I was living a dream life. And so I struggled. Fear and guilt were huge. And even after filing for divorce, some of the comments and leading up to wanting to file for the divorce, the comments that I got from friends and family were disheartening because I'm a human with a heart and I matter. And the life that I live and that I want to live matters. And it can't be overshadowed by what you think my life is.
Right. What do you wish more people would understand about complicated family dynamics?
I wish that people would educate themselves on manipulation, control, and abuse so that should someone in your circle find themselves in those circumstances, you would have the wherewithal and the understanding to be supportive of them and not judgmental, and not to say cruel and hurtful things that push them deeper inside themselves and make them even more fearful of stepping out to live a life that they deserve.
I think that's extremely powerful because it's hard enough to deal with it by yourself, but it's also hard enough to open up and immediately be shot down or judged, because then you get back in your head thinking, well, am I seeing this different? Am I the one? Is he right? Are they right? So I think that's a wonderful takeaway. Is there anything we didn't discuss that you would like to share, or anything you would like to leave any of the listeners with?
Yes. I would like to welcome people to check out Alimony of Life if they are contemplating going through or challenged on the other side of divorce. It's myself and four other writers. We write from our own experiences. We have, I host a private community, and there's lots of um, amazing information and motivation in there. I also have my memoir, Lessons on the Way to One Some, which is my healing and self-discovery journey through divorce, which published back in October. I share many of the experiences, but most importantly, the lessons that I learned from each and every one of them, and what it is that I'm doing now in my life that makes it so amazing to wake up to every morning. And check out, if you're wanting to support domestic violence, please check out Confronting Domestic Violence. But what I would like to leave people with is, as I was writing the book, one of the things that I talked about in the book was being fearful and sitting down and doing an exercise where I wrote down every single traumatic experience I had been through in my life, fearful to leave my marriage, but it was so important for me to chronicle all of the times that life knocked me down and how I myself got up again. And there was story after story after story. And what I realized was that I had always been, from the age of 7, I had been this amazing, powerful, strong person. And life did lots of things to me that made me forget about that. But in the moment when I did the exercise, it fortified my mind and my heart in such a way that I couldn't deny who I'd always been, who I was coming into, and who I wanted to be. So if that's where you are, if you're struggling, you're fearful, think about all the times you've survived. Put that in your pocket and use that to go forward.
Thank you. That was great. I think you're very inspiring. I think a lot of people are going to love this. And lastly, I just want to tell you thank you very much for sharing. And obviously, I didn't know you when you were younger, but I'm honored to have known you now, and you seem like a very wonderful, strong woman. So just don't forget that.
Thank you so much, Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, I hope you have a good rest of your week, okay?
Thank you. You too.
Thanks. Bye-bye. Thank you so much, Regina. I'm so grateful that we got to meet and have that conversation. I think you will reach a lot of people with that. So please, if you felt called to what Miss Regina was saying, please feel free to reach out to her. I will have her links in our show notes. So let's get back to it. One of the most common triggers for family guilt. What do we think that is? Boundaries. Yep. Setting them is absolutely necessary, though. It's healthy. It's empowering. But yet, the moment you say no, or I can't, or this isn't healthy for me, guilt creeps in. Because maybe you never learned boundaries, or maybe you were taught that love means sacrifice, even if it breaks you. But here's your reminder. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not a bad daughter, sibling, cousin, or parent for needing space. You know what you are? You're human. So, how do we even begin to heal from this guilt? Well, I like to journal it because what's really causing this? Is it my beliefs or is it actually someone else's expectations? And we've heard throughout the season that sometimes the guilt we feel is not actually ours to hold on to. So writing it down, figuring that out can be really eye-opening. Talk to someone that is outside your family, whether that's a therapist, a trusted friend, or someone who can give you perspective that isn't biased towards your family or a certain family member. And probably the hardest one for me that I learned is to use compassionate language. Instead of telling myself that I'm abandoning them, maybe I should be saying, I'm choosing peace. Instead of saying, I failed them, I can try to say, you know what? I'm human. I tried. And I know sometimes we don't like to quote unquote brag about ourselves, but we should be celebrating our growth, even if it makes others uncomfortable. You're not responsible for shrinking yourself down to fit someone else's comfort zone. That one is probably one of the most important things we can do as a person. Do not shrink yourself down to fit someone else's comfort zone or idea of you. And most importantly, remember that love can have limits, and boundaries do not mean less love. They mean sustainable love. If today's episode stirred something in you, I see you. I know this stuff isn't easy to talk about, but that's why we have to talk about it. Because guilt thrives in silence. And here, we speak it. We name it, we unlearn it, and we grow. You're allowed to love your family and protect yourself. You're allowed to grieve the relationship you wish you had with someone and still find the joy in the life that you're building now. All right, that's it for today. Next week, we're exploring a different kind of guilt, career guilt. Just a reminder, this podcast is all heart, not healthcare. Please talk to a professional for medical advice. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Unfiltered Feels Podcast. Share this with someone who needs it, or leave a review. And don't forget, the things you're feeling, you're not alone. I'll see you next time.